Suffering doesn't come from what happens to you. It comes from your resistance to it. If you want to break free from the endless cycle of emotional pain, the first thing you need to understand is a brutal and often overlooked truth. Suffering is not caused by events themselves, but by your resistance to what is. Most people go through their entire lives without ever realizing this. They remain trapped in a perpetual state of inner turmoil, constantly reliving the same pain over and over again, completely unaware that they are the ones keeping the suffering alive. Carl Jung, one of the greatest minds in psychology, summed this up perfectly in one of his most powerful quotes. "What you resist persists." And this isn't just a nice-sounding phrase. It's a profound psychological and spiritual truth that has the power to transform your entire life. Think about this deeply. Whenever something painful happens in your life, maybe you lose a job, a relationship ends, someone betrays you, or you face a major setback, your emotional reaction is natural. You might feel sadness, anger, disappointment, fear, confusion. All of these are valid, human emotions. But here's the twist. The suffering you experience doesn't come from the event itself. It comes from your internal battle with reality. It comes from the voice in your mind that says, "This shouldn't be happening. This is unfair. I can't live with this." That inner resistance, the refusal to accept what is what transforms pain into prolonged torture. That's the true source of suffering. You see, the human mind is wired to seek control. We want life to go our way. We want to avoid discomfort at all costs. We want predictability, stability, and certainty. But life doesn't work according to our personal preferences. It doesn't obey our rules. It operates under its own mysterious rhythm. So what happens when life throws us a curveball? When things don't go as planned? Our instinct is to resist, to fight, to deny. We say, "This shouldn't have happened to me." And right there, in that moment of mental rebellion against reality, suffering begins. Let's take a breakup, for example. The natural pain of losing someone might last for days, weeks, maybe even a few months. But the suffering that lingers for years, that deep, agonizing ache that comes from refusal, from clinging to the past, from replaying the memories on an endless loop, from believing that it should have turned out differently. It's not the loss that's destroying you. It's your refusal to let go of what already is. The same goes for betrayal, failure, rejection, or any kind of loss. It's not the event that breaks you. It's the constant mental resistance to accepting what's already done. So, how do we break this destructive cycle? The answer lies in a spiritual principle that, when fully embraced, has the power to change everything. Radical acceptance. Now let's be clear. Acceptance does not mean resignation. It doesn't mean that you like what happened. It doesn't mean that you approve of it or that it didn't hurt. Acceptance simply means that you stop fighting with reality. You stop pouring your energy into an unwinnable war. You stop resisting what already is. Instead, you take that same energy and redirect it toward the only thing you truly have power over, your response. And when you finally accept what has happened, truly accept it, something incredible begins to unfold. The heaviness starts to lift, not because the pain magically vanishes, but because you've stopped feeding it. You're no longer fueling the suffering with your resistance. Imagine someone who's just been fired. If they hold on to anger, blame, and the belief that it was unjust, they can remain stuck in that pain for years, resenting the company, feeling like a victim, and carrying that wound into every future job. But if instead They choose to accept what happened and ask, "What can I do with this?" They reclaim their power. They stop living in reaction and start living in intention. The pain becomes a catalyst for growth. That's the key. It all comes down to your perception. Jung often spoke about the importance of integrating all aspects of our experience, even the painful and uncomfortable ones, because pain, when accepted rather than resisted, transforms into wisdom. A major mistake we all make at some point is believing that our suffering is unique, that no one else could possibly understand what we're going through, that our pain is somehow more unbearable than what others have faced. But the truth is, pain is a universal part of the human experience. Everyone suffers. What separates those who evolve from those who remain stuck is not the amount of pain they experience, it's their relationship to it. Those who resist pain suffer. Those who accept pain grow. If you truly want to heal, if you truly want to be free, the first step is to stop waging war against life. Accept what happened. Accept what you can't change. Accept what already is. And then focus all your energy on what you can change. And here's what no one tells you about liberation from suffering. The most shocking realization is that most of your suffering never came from the event itself. It came from how tightly you held on to the pain. A relationship ended, and you were heartbroken for years. But it wasn't just the breakup. It was your refusal to let go. Someone betrayed you, and you couldn't move on. But it wasn't just the betrayal. It was your attachment to resentment. You lost an opportunity, and you felt stuck in life. But it wasn't just the missed chance. It was your obsession with what could have been. When you finally let go of resistance, when you stop fighting reality, suffering begins to crumble. This doesn't mean the pain disappears overnight, but it loses its grip on you. And over time, the pain turns into a lesson, not a lifelong burden. Now comes the deeper part, the one most people never even consider: how your unconscious mind keeps you trapped in suffering. Because once you understand that suffering is born from resistance, the next question is, if I know this, why do I keep repeating the same emotional patterns over and over again? And this is where everything changes. Because once you uncover the hidden answer to that question, you'll realize something powerful. You have far more control over your life than you ever imagined. So keep watching, because in the next section, we'll uncover something truly powerful: how your mind has been unconsciously conditioned to hold on to suffering. And more importantly, what you can start doing today to break free from that pattern once and for all. Let's begin with a hard truth. Your unconscious mind is programmed to make you suffer over and over again. If you've ever felt like pain just keeps showing up in your life out of nowhere, like suffering is some kind of bad luck that follows you around, then it's time to wake up to a truth that very few people dare to tell you. The reality is, you are the one repeating your pain again and again, without even realizing it. And not because you want to suffer, but because your unconscious programming is pulling you back into the same emotional loops again and again. The renowned psychologist Carl Jung put it this way in one of his most powerful and confronting statements: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. What Jung meant is that the pain you keep experiencing is not random. It's not that the universe is punishing you, or that life is just cruel for no reason. It's not that you're doomed, or unlucky, or cursed. It's because inside of you, deep in your subconscious, there are emotional and mental patterns that you keep reenacting automatically. You're reliving them, Not because you want to, but because they're familiar. They're wired into your internal system. The unconscious mind is like a hidden software installed when you were still a child. And if you grew up in an environment where love came with pain, where abandonment was normal, or where safety was never guaranteed, then those beliefs became your emotional blueprint. They weren't chosen consciously. They were absorbed, imprinted, and now they're running the show. No one tells you this. Your unconscious doesn't care about your happiness. It only cares about what's familiar. That's why, even when your conscious mind wants to escape suffering, a deeper part of you keeps attracting the same people, the same situations, the same emotional outcomes. It's not a coincidence. It's a pattern. It's the invisible trap of the unconscious. Have you noticed how you always seem to end up in relationships that hurt you? Have you ever experienced moments of joy or success, only to somehow ruin them or lose them unexpectedly? Do you feel like you keep running into the same kind of problems, even when you promise yourself that this time it'll be different? That's not bad luck. That's your subconscious mind repeating what it knows. That's emotional self-sabotage at work. But why would anyone choose what destroys them? The answer lies in what you learned as a child. If you learned that love was always followed by pain or abandonment, then as an adult, you'll unconsciously seek out relationships that recreate that exact emotional experience. Not because you want to suffer, but because that version of love is what your nervous system understands. It feels familiar. And in the mind's twisted logic, familiar equals safe, even if it hurts. If you experienced rejection, humiliation, or neglect when you were young, then today you might avoid opportunities, relationships, or dreams, because a part of you is terrified that the same pain will return. You may stay where it's safe, even if that means staying in a cycle of pain. And here's the part that hits the hardest. As long as you don't become aware of these patterns, you will repeat them for the rest of your life. And you'll call it destiny. You'll say things like, "Why do I always end up with the same kind of person? Why does my life never really change? Why does everything always go wrong for me?" But the truth is, it's not life. It's not fate. It's not the universe working against you. It's you, reenacting the script that was written inside of you long ago. So how do you break this unconscious pattern of suffering? Here comes the key. You cannot change what you cannot see. If you truly want to end the cycle of emotional pain, the very first step is to recognize the pattern you've been unconsciously living. You need to bring it into the light. Start by asking yourself a few deeply honest questions. What has been the dominant emotion in my life? Rejection, abandonment, betrayal, frustration, fear? What kind of relationships or situations do I keep attracting? What story am I telling myself about who I am and what the world is? When you answer these questions truthfully, something incredible happens. You begin to realize that the suffering you've been experiencing hasn't been coming from the outside. It's been coming from within you. You've been projecting it onto the world, again and again, without realizing it. And that is the moment when everything starts to change. Breaking the cycle of emotional pain doesn't mean you'll never feel sadness, anger, or frustration again. Those emotions are part of being human. But what it does mean is that you'll no longer be a prisoner of a hidden pattern that controls you without your awareness. Because the moment you become conscious of your unconscious programming, you stop being its slave. You can't avoid all pain in life, but you can stop recycling it. You can stop perpetuating it. You can stop choosing it. without even realizing you are. From that moment on, you begin to choose consciously, instead of reacting on autopilot. And in the next section, we're going even deeper. We'll explore how the ego plays a central role in keeping you trapped in suffering, and more importantly, what you can do to dismantle its power before it keeps sabotaging your life. Because once you understand the role of the ego in all of this, that's when you finally begin to reclaim your power. Let's talk about the ego. The ego feeds off your suffering. It keeps your pain alive. If you're truly committed to breaking free from the emotional patterns that keep hurting you, then there's something vital you need to understand. Your ego is your biggest obstacle on the path to healing. The ego is that inner voice that convinces you that you have every right to feel hurt, that the world is unfair, that others need to change before you can be happy. It tells you stories like, "I'm always the victim," or "Nothing ever works out for me." But here's the brutal truth. The ego doesn't want you to heal, because if you healed, if you truly let go of your suffering, the ego would lose its identity. It would no longer have anything to feed on. The ego thrives on conflict, on blame, on judgment, on the illusion of separation. It creates drama just to keep itself alive. It tells you that your pain is proof that you're right and the world is wrong, that you're justified in your resentment, that you need to hold on to your wounds. But when you start to see the ego for what it is, a defense mechanism, a mask, a survival strategy, you can begin to disarm it. You can begin to step into a deeper version of yourself, one that no longer needs to cling to pain in order to feel real, one that doesn't need to repeat the past in order to feel safe. Because the truth is, healing is not about becoming someone else. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. Carl Jung once said, "The mind that creates the problem is not the same mind that can solve it." This statement holds a profound truth, one that reveals the very mechanism of our suffering. The part of you that has caused your emotional pain is not capable of healing it, and that part is the ego. The ego is not just a voice in your head. It is the filter through which you perceive everything. And unfortunately, it's that same ego that created your pain in the first place. When you try to heal from within the ego, all you do is reinforce the exact suffering you're trying to escape. But how does the ego sabotage your emotional healing? The ego is cunning. It doesn't blatantly tell you, "I want you to suffer." Instead, it whispers convincing reasons why you should continue to hold on to your pain. It will remind you again and again of everything that was done to you, how you were betrayed, how life was unfair, how people abandoned you. It recycles those memories like a looped film reel, making you believe that thinking about them constantly gives you some kind of power. But in truth, this only keeps you trapped in the same loop of pain, in the same emotional prison that the ego built. One of the most dangerous tricks the ego plays is making you identify with your suffering. It convinces you that your pain is who you are. Without even realizing it, you begin to define yourself through the lens of your past wounds. You start saying things like, "I'm always betrayed," "People always leave me," "This always happens to me." And each time you say it, each time you think it, you carve that identity deeper into your psyche. You unknowingly become loyal to your pain. The ego will also try to convince you that the problem lies outside of you. It tells you that your pain is someone else's fault, that life owes you something, that your circumstances need to change before you can feel okay again. And this is the perfect trap, because if the solution is always external, then you never have to take ownership of your healing. You remain in a state of waiting, waiting for an apology, for justice, for someone to save you. And as long as you're waiting, you're not moving, you're not evolving, you're stuck. You see, the ego feeds on conflict, comparison, and old wounds that never quite heal, because the ego itself keeps scratching at them until they bleed again. It thrives when you dwell on what went wrong. It keeps you in a cycle of self-pity, resentment, and blame. It convinces you that you are powerless. This is where the trap of victimhood begins. One of the most subtle and dangerous ways the ego keeps you weak is through the identity of the victim. When you fall into victimhood, you start believing that everything bad that happens to you is because of others, other people, bad luck, cruel fate. And while it might feel like you're protecting yourself by blaming the outside world, what you're actually doing is surrendering your personal power. Because if you believe you have no control over your life, you will never take the steps necessary to change it. And that's exactly what the ego wants, to keep you small, defenseless, and suffering. But here comes the harshest truth of all. No one is coming to save you. No matter how much you cry, no matter how many times you blame others, no matter how loudly you complain, no one is going to rescue you. The only person who can break this cycle is you. So how do you dismantle the ego and regain control over your life? The first and most important step is recognizing that you are not your ego. You are not your suffering. You are not your past. You are not that inner voice telling you you'll always be a victim. The ego wants you to cling to your pain because that's what keeps it alive. But the moment you stop feeding it, the ego starts to lose power. It begins to weaken. And in that moment, something incredible happens. You start to awaken. There are 3 powerful ways to begin breaking the ego's grip on you. 1. Observe the voice in your head. When the ego starts reminding you of your wounds, when it tells you life is unfair, pause. Don't react. Just watch the voice like an observer. Realize that this voice is not you. It's just a mental program, a pattern, a recording that plays over and over. The more you observe it without identifying with it, the less control it has. Second, stop feeding the story of suffering. Every time you replay the story of how you were wronged, every time you talk about your pain to anyone who will listen, you reinforce that wound. You give it more power. Ask yourself, does this story empower me, or does it weaken me? If it weakens you, let it go. Stop rehearsing your pain. 3. Do the opposite of what the ego wants. The ego wants you to react, to lash out, to hold grudges, to stay angry. But when you respond with calm, with detachment, with acceptance, you disarm the ego. You take back your power. The moment you begin to see the ego for what it truly is, its control starts to crumble. You stop feeling the need to hold on to pain. You stop needing outside validation. You stop identifying as a victim of your circumstances. And in that clarity, you realize something powerful. The suffering never truly came from what happened to you. The pain was real, yes. But the story the ego built around that pain is what kept you trapped. And now, we move to one of the most transformative truths about emotional healing. Pain does not go away by fighting it. It begins to dissolve when you embrace it in a completely different way. This is the part no one teaches us. We're told from a young age to avoid pain at all costs. Don't cry. Be strong. Don't show weakness. So we learn to repress it, to deny it, to run from it. But the truth is, what you resist persists. The more you try to suppress emotional pain, the more power it gains over you. Repressed pain doesn't disappear. It buries itself deep in your mind, in your body, in your behavior. It becomes chronic anxiety. It becomes unexplainable anger. It becomes numbness. And the more you refuse to feel it, the deeper it roots itself in your subconscious. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You cannot heal by ignoring your pain. You must face it, completely, honestly, and without resistance. Think of pain like a force. When you push against it, it pushes back. That's why, when you try to escape emotions like sadness, grief, or rage, they become even stronger. You tell yourself not to cry, not to feel, not to break down. You distract yourself with work, with social media, with anything that keeps you from sitting with yourself. But when you're finally alone, when the noise stops, the pain comes rushing back even harder. You blame others. You blame life. You tell yourself that the pain is their fault. But as long as you keep projecting the pain outward, you will never look inward. And that is where the healing truly begins. It's not the pain that destroys us. It's the resistance to the pain that makes it unbearable. So, what's the key to breaking the cycle? Accept the pain. Stop running. Allow yourself to feel, fully, consciously, without judgment. If you're sad, cry. If you're angry, sit with the anger. Don't act on it impulsively, but don't deny it either. Watch the emotion. Witness it. Feel it move through your body, and something incredible will begin to happen. When you stop resisting pain and start welcoming it as a natural human experience, it starts to lose its grip. The monster in your mind begins to shrink. And here's the most beautiful truth of all. Nothing lasts forever. Every emotion, no matter how intense, is temporary. Every wave of suffering will pass, if you allow it to. But when you resist it, when you keep dragging the story with you, you stretch the suffering far beyond what's necessary. Healing doesn't happen in the future. It happens in the now. In the moment you decide to stop running from yourself and start embracing everything you are, wounds and all. That's when you begin to truly transform. Carl Jung spoke deeply about the importance of inner transformation, and one of the central truths of that journey is the understanding of impermanence. Nothing lasts forever, not joy, not pain. Everything is in constant motion. Just like pleasure, pain is temporary. It does not define you, and it is not eternal. Think back to the last time you went through a difficult moment. At that time, it may have felt like you were trapped in a storm that would never end. You may have felt hopeless, exhausted, as though you'd never escape. But somehow, you did. You're here now, wiser, more experienced, with new perspectives. You made it through. And the same thing will happen with whatever pain you're going through now. This too shall pass. The storm will calm, and the sun will rise again. So how do we begin to radically accept pain instead of being consumed by it? How do we stop being slaves to our own suffering? There are steps you can begin to practice right now. Powerful tools to reclaim your emotional freedom and step into your inner strength. First, stop judging your pain. Don't label it. Don't overanalyze it. Don't ask yourself, "Why am I feeling like this?" or "When will this end?" Instead, simply allow yourself to feel, without resistance, without shame, without stories. It isn't good or bad. It's simply an experience moving through you. That's all it is. Second, Observe it in your body. When you feel anxiety, anger, grief, or sorrow, don't let your mind spin elaborate narratives about how unfair life is or how broken you are. Instead, bring your attention back to your body. Ask yourself, where do I feel this emotion? How does it physically show up inside me? Maybe it's a tight chest, a lump in your throat, trembling hands, or a knot in your stomach. Just notice it. Observe it without trying to fix or fight it. Third, breathe through it. Instead of clenching your jaw, tightening your fists, or distracting yourself, try this. Take a deep breath, and then another. Let the breath move through the emotion. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to make the pain disappear. Your only job is to be present with what is, fully present. And something incredible happens when you do this. When you stop resisting pain and start welcoming it with awareness, you realize it has no power over you. The pain might still be there, but its grip on you begins to fade. You're no longer a victim. You become someone who can move through pain with strength, with maturity, with grace. This is your true power, not in control, not in resistance, but in acceptance. Most people spend their entire lives running from pain, distracting themselves, avoiding the uncomfortable, escaping through addictions, through work, through denial. But the only real way to free yourself from suffering is to face it directly, consciously, with an open heart. And when you do that, when you stop fighting and allow yourself to truly feel, something miraculous happens. You discover that pain was never your enemy. Suffering didn't come to destroy you. It came to awaken you, to shape you, to transform you. And once you understand this, the fear begins to dissolve. So now, let's go even deeper. Because once you stop resisting pain, you can actually use it. Not only to heal, but to evolve in ways you never imagined. This is where true transformation begins. You can turn your pain into power. This is the alchemical process of healing. By now you understand that resisting pain only makes it stronger, that avoiding it makes the wounds deeper, and that accepting it is the first step toward freedom. But there is something even more extraordinary you can do. You can transform your suffering into your greatest source of strength. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. He spoke of the ancient art of alchemy, not as the literal transformation of lead into gold, but as a psychological and spiritual journey. The true alchemy happens within us. The lead is our pain, our deepest wounds, our fears, our traumas. The gold is what we become when we embrace that pain and allow it to refine us. Wisdom, strength, maturity, compassion. These are the gifts on the other side of suffering. So the real question isn't, how can I avoid suffering? The real question is, how can I use my suffering to become a stronger, wiser, freer version of myself? This is the hidden power of pain. It's a call to awaken. Think about the strongest people you've ever known. The ones with depth, with insight, with a quiet courage that radiates from their presence. They didn't get there because they had easy lives. They didn't become who they are by avoiding hardship. No, they walked through fire. They were broken open. And on the other side, they were reborn. Every experience of pain is a crossroads, a sacred invitation. You can let it close you down, or you can let it open you up. You can let it define you, or you can let it refine you. It's the choice to stop being who you were and to become someone entirely new, more awake, more resilient, more deeply connected to life. Carl Jung once spoke about something called the dark night of the soul, a phase where an individual comes face to face with their deepest suffering. It's a period of intense emotional and spiritual turmoil, where it feels like the foundation of your world is collapsing. You feel like you've reached your limit, like the weight of life is simply too much to bear. The pain becomes overwhelming, suffocating even. But Jung didn't describe this moment as a punishment. He saw it as a sacred opportunity, an invitation to transformation, a test not of your strength, but of your willingness to evolve. Because it is precisely when everything seems lost, when you think you can't go on, that you are standing on the edge of your greatest breakthrough. Now imagine that instead of resisting this darkness, you paused and asked yourself, what is this trying to teach me? How can I use this pain not to collapse, but to rise? In that moment, something powerful happens. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and start becoming the alchemist of your own life. You begin to transform destruction into rebirth. From ashes, a new version of you is forged, stronger, wiser, more aligned with your true self. Each time you've gone through loss, betrayal, heartbreak, or deep disappointment, something within you has died. But what most people don't realize is that this death is necessary. It's the death of illusions, the end of false expectations, the dismantling of identities that no longer serve your growth. And what follows every death is a chance for rebirth, a sacred opportunity to rebuild yourself from a deeper place of truth. If you take a moment to reflect on your life, you'll likely notice that the experiences that shaped you the most were not the happiest ones. It was the struggles, the hardships, the times you were pushed to your edge and somehow found the strength to move forward. That is the essence of transformation. Pain, in its purest form, breaks you apart. It shatters the beliefs you held about yourself, the world, and others. It forces you to look in the mirror and confront all that you've ignored. Your shadows, your wounds, the parts of you that you've been too afraid to acknowledge. And within that confrontation lies a gift, the chance to choose, to either remain stuck or to evolve, to let pain define you or refine you. So how do you turn your suffering into power? How do you alchemize pain into purpose? Here's a practical framework to begin this transformation. First, shift your mindset. Pain is not a punishment. It's an initiation. Life doesn't give you suffering to break you. It gives you challenges to awaken you. Those who see pain as unfair often remain trapped in bitterness. But those who embrace it as part of the journey emerge stronger than ever. Every challenge you face is an opportunity to grow, to learn, to evolve. So stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this here to teach me? Second, transform your story into your power. Look at those who have been through immense suffering, yet have managed to turn their pain into a force for good. People who were rejected and learned to validate themselves. People who were betrayed and discovered the strength of trusting their intuition. People who hit rock bottom and uncovered a power they never knew existed. Your story is uniquely yours, but how you use it is entirely up to you. Third, let pain fuel your purpose. Pain can either destroy you or drive you. It's your decision. If someone hurt you, don't dwell in resentment. Use it as a fire to rise. If life feels unfair, show the world how you can overcome. If you've experienced loss, fill the emptiness with meaning. The most successful people in the world didn't get there because they avoided pain. They got there because they used their pain as a launching pad to greatness. And then comes the final stage, turning pain into wisdom. When you've walked through suffering and truly learned from it, something remarkable happens. You become unshakable. You stop reacting to the negativity of others because you understand that their projections are not yours to carry. You no longer fear pain because you faced it and survived. In fact, you've emerged stronger, wiser, more grounded in your truth. You become a person with an undeniable presence, someone who radiates quiet strength because you've been through darkness and found your own light. This is what Jung referred to as individuation, the sacred process of becoming who you truly are, without masks, without fear, without needing anything external to validate your worth. And when you reach this point, the emotional cycle of pain begins to dissolve. You no longer define yourself by what hurt you. You don't avoid pain. You welcome it as a teacher, a guide, a signal that you are ready for your next evolution. And then it hits you. Pain didn't make you weaker. It made you invincible. The choice is now in your hands. You know the truth. Pain isn't something you should run from. It's the spark that can ignite your most profound transformation. You have two options: remain stuck in suffering, resisting, feeling like a victim of life's cruelty, or use that same suffering as a springboard to become someone stronger, wiser, more unstoppable than ever before. Only one of those paths will set you free. So which path will you choose? If you choose to break the cycle and turn every difficult experience into a stepping stone for growth, write it in the comments. I transform my pain into power. Because once you make that decision, once you truly commit to owning your journey, nothing and no one can stop you. In the end, it all comes down to this. Will you let pain control you, poison your thoughts, drain your spirit, or will you do what few dare to do, use it as a catalyst for your transformation? Jung said it best. You cannot awaken unless you first hit rock bottom. Now that you understand the truth behind suffering, the power to change your life is in your hands. Pain only has power over you if you keep resisting it. But once you stop running and begin embracing it as your greatest teacher, everything shifts. You become the master of your destiny, not its victim. So if you've made it this far, it's because you're ready. Ready to change your life. Ready to stop being defined by your suffering and start writing a new story. But this is just the beginning. Watch the next video. It will leave you speechless and help you dive even deeper into your path of transformation. Click now, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the content that could truly change your life. I'll see you in the next video. The wound of not feeling enough. It's the invisible root behind the way you love. There's a reason why you keep giving your heart to someone who can't give you anything in return. And that reason has nothing to do with them. It's not about who they are or what they do. It's about you. About something deeper. Something that can't be seen with the naked eye. A wound you haven't dared to face yet. Because when love starts to feel like a battle to be chosen, when you exhaust yourself trying to prove your worth to someone who doesn't see it, when you justify every act of indifference with the desperate hope that maybe one day they'll change, what's speaking in those moments isn't your heart, it's your wound. And that wound has a name, the wound of not feeling enough. This is one of the most invisible emotional wounds, and at the same time, one of the most destructive, because it doesn't scream, it doesn't show, it's not easily recognized, but it shapes everything, every decision you make, every connection you form, and the way you give and receive love. Most women who love from this space don't do it because they lack emotional intelligence. They do it because deep down, way beneath the surface, they are still trying to prove they are worthy of love. That's the root of it all. Because if you believe you have to earn love, you're already starting from a place of lack. Carl Jung said, "What you do not make conscious will manifest as fate." That's exactly what happens when your wound is the one making the choices for you. That wound keeps choosing the same pattern, again and again. Someone emotionally unavailable, closed off, damaged. Someone who can't truly offer you anything real. But they awaken in you the illusion that if they love you, if you can be the one to make them change, then finally you'll have proven that you're enough. But that's the trap. You're trying to heal your self-worth through someone else, and that someone, by definition, is unavailable for love. And that's not a coincidence. It's a mirror of what you're still not giving yourself. This pattern didn't begin with them. It began with your story, with that stage in your life when you first felt that your worth depended on how hard you tried, when you learned you had to be more obedient, more perfect, more quiet, more pleasing, just to be loved. That programming rooted itself deep in your unconscious. And now, without even realizing it, you're repeating the same story, hoping that this time it will be different, that this time the other person will choose you, that this time love will heal what hurt before. But it doesn't work that way. As long as your wound is in the driver's seat, all you will feel is frustration, emptiness, and the constant belief that you're not enough. You give everything. You wait. You hope. And when you don't receive the same in return, you blame yourself. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I shouldn't have said how I felt. And in doing so, without even noticing, you become your own aggressor. What you don't realize is that this dynamic isn't love. It's a defense mechanism. It's the way your psyche is trying to fix something that was left unresolved years ago. But here's the hard truth. No one is going to come and give you the love you keep denying yourself. No one can fill the space where you have abandoned yourself. And yes, that truth hurts, but it's also the key to your freedom. Because the day you finally understand this, you stop begging for love. You stop justifying someone's absence. You stop chasing after someone who doesn't see you. You begin to realize you don't need to convince anyone that you're worthy. And if someone can't see your worth, that's not your place. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the process of internal integration. That begins the moment you have the courage to look at your wound without filters. When you finally see that your desperation to be loved comes from a part of you that was ignored long before this relationship. And that part of you, that little inner girl, needs you now. She needs your presence, your validation, your love. No one else can give that to her. No one else can love her for you. That is your responsibility. And if you don't take it, you'll keep falling into the same relationships again and again, with different names, different faces, different stories, but always the same pattern. Loving someone who can't give you anything back. So before you keep blaming the other person, ask yourself, from where am I loving? If you're loving from fear, from abandonment, from emptiness, then it's time to stop, to pause, to look at yourself, to listen, to heal. Because you can't keep giving all of yourself to someone who doesn't even know how to receive it. That's not noble. That's emotional sacrifice. And sacrifice does not build love. It only depletes you. This, right here, is the beginning, the root, the core of why you keep choosing people who can't give you anything. But there's something even deeper you need to understand. Why does this lack attract you? Why does that emotional coldness pull you in? Why, even knowing they're not good for you, can't you let them go? Let's explore that next, because within that question lies the hidden logic of your wound, the reason why you keep repeating what hurts you the most. Why do you keep loving from a place of lack? Why do you feel drawn to people who offer you nothing? There is a quiet kind of pain, subtle, persistent, that becomes a pattern when it's left unhealed. It's a pain that leads you to look in the wrong direction, a pain that convinces you love lives in the place where it hurts the most, a pain that tells you that if someone doesn't choose you, you must be the problem. And that's how the cycle begins, a story that repeats without your awareness, a story where you are constantly drawn to emotionally unavailable people, cold, distant, detached, people who can't give you anything, yet somehow leave a mark on your soul. And it's not random. It's not bad luck. It's not that you just have terrible taste in partners. It's your wound, speaking, choosing, repeating what feels familiar. Because when you grow up in an environment where love was scarce, where you had to earn affection, a kind word, a gentle look, something inside you begins to associate love with sacrifice, with pain, with fear, with waiting. And without realizing it, that becomes your emotional compass. Your unconscious starts seeking out that same energy in your relationships. If all of this is starting to open your eyes, imagine what's coming next. The final sign is the most revealing of all. Your heart keeps attracting what resembles your past, not to punish you, but to heal what remains unresolved, to close the circle. Carl Jung explained it with striking precision. The unconscious is always striving to complete itself, and one of the ways it tries to do so is through symbolic repetition. Without even realizing it, you search for someone who can make you feel the same way you felt with that figure who once hurt you. But this time, you do it with the unconscious hope that things will be different. And that's exactly where the greatest self-deception begins. You start to believe that you can earn the love of someone who doesn't even have love to give. You find yourself drawn to someone emotionally unavailable, someone ambivalent, someone who gets close one day and then vanishes the next. And instead of walking away, something deep inside you latches on even harder. A voice, old and hidden and painfully familiar, whispers, "If this time I can get them to choose me, then I'm worthy. If I can win the love of someone who resembles the one who once hurt me, then I'll finally feel whole." But that love never comes, and you stay. You wait. You endure. You justify. You convince yourself that you're fighting for something meaningful, when in truth, you're just reliving an old wound. A wound born from lack, from absence, from a time when you had to settle for crumbs and call it love. And because your wound grew in the soil of scarcity, you now feel strangely comfortable in spaces where nothing is given, where there's no reciprocity, where you give everything and all you receive are fragments, moments so small and insignificant, but your mind turns them into castles. A glance, a message, a faint memory, and your imagination fills in the rest. Your heart clings to a promise that was never made, to a possibility that never existed. And the cruelest part is when someone finally comes along, who sees you, who treats you well, who doesn't require you to earn their love, who doesn't make you feel small. You recoil. You feel bored. You feel it's too good to be true. You feel like it's not real. So, you push them away. Why? Because your wound doesn't recognize healthy love. Because for you, loving has always meant struggle, sacrifice, anxiety. And when there's no drama, Your system panics. It becomes disoriented. That isn't love. That's emotional trauma disguised as love. Your body has learned to live on high alert, to anticipate disappointment, to fear abandonment. So paradoxically, you feel more alive in relationships that hurt, because pain has become your comfort zone. That's where the pattern becomes addictive, because every time someone rejects you, it activates that ancient wound, that little girl inside you who was never enough to be embraced, who was never truly seen, who had to work so hard to earn even the tiniest drop of affection. And she's still there, still waiting, still hoping that someone someday will finally say, "I choose you. I love you. I see you." But you keep searching for that recognition in all the wrong places, in people who don't have the capacity to give you what you deserve. And so, the cycle repeats. Love becomes a war you always lose, because the price of that war is your self-worth, your energy, your peace. And there comes a point when you no longer know whether you're fighting for love or just reliving the abandonment. That's when consciousness must enter the scene, because as long as your wound remains hidden in the shadows, it will continue choosing your relationships. It will continue disguising emotional dependence as love, and you'll keep believing that you are the problem, when in reality, the only thing you need is to heal that part of yourself that learned to suffer in order to feel loved. You don't need someone to change. You need to wake up, to see the pattern, to recognize with clarity that love born from lack will never bring you fulfillment, only more emptiness. And the truth is, you deserve something completely different. But in order to receive it, you first have to stop chasing what cannot give you anything. Here's the trap of emotional self-deception: justifying the unjustifiable out of fear of abandonment. There's something that almost no one tells you when it comes to toxic or one-sided relationships. Most people don't stay because they can't leave. They stay because they've built a story to justify the unjustifiable. This is what's called emotional self-deception, and it's one of the most subtle defense mechanisms of the unconscious. It protects you from having to face the pain head-on. When you're with someone who doesn't meet your needs, who makes you feel invisible, confused, used, or not enough, some part of you knows. You feel it. You sense it. But there's another part, the most wounded, the most vulnerable, that starts to tell another story. They're like this because they've suffered too much. I understand them. That's why it doesn't bother me so much. They're just afraid of love. Deep down, I know they love me. They just don't know how to show it. And just like that, without even realizing it, you begin to hold the relationship together more with your imagination than with reality. You start constructing a narrative that transforms abuse into sensitivity, coldness into trauma, indifference into fear of love, instability into emotional depth. And all of that feels noble. It feels loving. It feels like empathy. But it's not. It's fear. There's a fear that many of us carry deep inside, a fear that we barely dare to admit even to ourselves. It's the fear of accepting that someone you love isn't choosing you, that despite all the effort, the care, the sacrifices, and the pieces of yourself you've handed over, none of it is enough to make them stay. That person will not change, not for you, not for everything you've given. And maybe, deep down, you already know it. But the fear is not just about them leaving. What truly paralyzes you is the idea of being left alone, with your wounds wide open and your illusions shattered. Because it wasn't just about the person. It was about the story you built around them. That story made you feel like you weren't alone, like everything made sense, like love would eventually fix it all. Losing the illusion, that narrative you clung to so tightly, is what hurts the most. So you fight to keep that illusion alive. You make excuses. You tell yourself they're going through something tough, that they're emotionally distant now, but they'll come around, that their silence doesn't mean indifference, it just means they're tired. You remember the moments when they were sweet and attentive, and you convince yourself that those moments define who they really are. But what you're actually doing is something far more dangerous. You're turning your pain into justification. You're using your empathy as armor to protect yourself from the truth. Because if you looked clearly, if you admitted to yourself that they're using you, that they don't love you the way you love them, that there's no real reciprocity, you'd have to do the unthinkable. You'd have to walk away. You'd have to let go. You'd have to set boundaries. And that, for you, touches the deepest wound, the one that whispers, "You're not enough." The one that says, "If I leave, no one will ever truly love me." The one that makes you believe that maybe you're the problem, that maybe you're asking for too much. So you choose the path that feels safest to your nervous system. Denial, self-deception. And the thing about self-deception is that it works for a while. It gives you temporary relief. It numbs the ache. Until one day, your body begins to speak louder than your thoughts. The anxiety becomes constant. You can't sleep peacefully. You start to look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back at you. And then it hits you. Your entire world is orbiting around someone who doesn't even notice your gravity. That realization shatters your soul, not just because of what the relationship has become, but because you realize you betrayed yourself. You silenced your instincts. You made yourself small to be loved. You mistook endurance for love. You became an expert at forgiving someone who never even apologized, all because you were terrified of being alone. But that fear, that terror of abandonment, isn't new. It didn't begin with this relationship. That fear was planted long ago, in the earliest chapters of your life. In those moments when you needed love, but it wasn't given. When you felt unseen, and you blamed yourself. When you learned to be the understanding one, the good one, the one who doesn't complain, the one who waits, who adjusts, who doesn't ask for too much. And now, you're repeating the same story. That unhealed wound is still there, whispering to you that if you're just more patient, more empathetic, more loving, maybe then they'll change. Maybe then they'll see your worth. But here's the truth. They won't. Not because you're unworthy of love, but because when you love from your wounds, you choose from your need, not from your self-worth. The people you attract aren't there to heal you. They're there to reflect what still needs healing within you. And that's why the pattern repeats. Even when the faces change, the pain feels the same. The same emptiness when they don't reply. The same hope when they show a flicker of affection. And you hold on for months, sometimes years, even decades, clinging to the fantasy you created, hoping it might finally become real. But it never does, because it was never love. It was a reflection of your fear. The most courageous thing you can do is not to wait. The real bravery lies in facing the pain, in admitting that you lied to yourself, that you justified what was unjustifiable, because you didn't know how to live without the illusion. But that's where transformation begins, when you stop lying to yourself, when you choose to see reality, even if it hurts, when you take the side of your dignity, not your desperation. It's not easy, but it's necessary, because no real change can happen without a dose of brutal honesty. And sometimes, the hardest truth is the one that sets you free. Many people silently ask themselves the same question after a painful breakup or after falling back into a relationship that drained them. How could this happen again? And what hurts the most is not just the pain itself. It's realizing that despite all the promises you made to yourself, you repeated the same pattern. Again. That's not a coincidence. It's an unconscious mechanism, a pattern rooted so deeply inside you that it cannot be undone by willpower alone. Carl Jung said it best. What you do not make conscious will manifest as fate. That's exactly what happens with unhealed emotional wounds. They don't stay quiet. They don't fade away with time. They manifest. They disguise themselves. They show up in your relationships, in the way you love, in the way you attach, in the way you sacrifice, until you face them, acknowledge them, embrace them, and begin to transform them. When a wound is born in childhood, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, humiliation, lack of love, it leaves a permanent imprint on your emotional blueprint. It becomes an internal map, and from that moment on, you begin to repeat the pattern, not because you want to suffer, but because your soul is trying to close a story that was left unfinished. And where does it search for closure? In your relationships. Because intimate relationships are the perfect stage where your unconscious can reenact the unresolved pain. It's in the places where you care the most, where you feel most vulnerable, where you give the most, that your deepest traumas are triggered. That's why sometimes you fall in love with a dizzying intensity. You feel like you've found your soulmate, your missing piece, someone from another lifetime. But in reality, what's happening is not destiny, it's recognition, unconscious recognition. Your wound recognizes their energy, not from light, but from pain. Your body says, "This feels like the abandonment I once knew." And instead of fleeing, you stay. Because part of you believes this time you can fix it, that this time you can rewrite the ending. But you can't, because that person isn't there to heal you. They're there to reflect what you still need to heal within yourself. And until you understand this, you will keep repeating the same trauma over and over, changing faces, but never changing the wound. Trauma has a quiet way of pulling you back into what's familiar, even if what's familiar is destroying you. It makes you believe that something new is dangerous, that something healthy is boring, that something peaceful isn't real, because your body only knows how to survive in chaos. And when peace finally comes, you don't know what to do with it. Your nervous system panics. Your heart feels empty. That's the hidden effect of unhealed emotional trauma. It silently ties you to the pain you're familiar with and distances you from the very experiences that could actually heal you. And as long as you're not aware of it, your wound will continue to recreate the same kind of situations that once hurt you the most. The worst part is, it'll do it with your full consent. You'll be the one justifying it, defending it, holding on to it, not because you want more pain, but because you've confused that pain with love. If you grew up believing that love had to be earned, that you had to fight for it, wait for it, prove yourself worthy of it, then when someone offers you genuine, unconditional love, you can't accept it. It doesn't fit your inner map. It terrifies you. So, once again, you find yourself drawn to the one who's unavailable, to the one who doesn't choose you, to the one who makes you feel like you're not enough. Not because you're foolish, but because your trauma is still in control. And that trauma, it doesn't calm down just because someone else loves you more. It doesn't get smaller with affection alone. It only starts to heal through awareness, when you find the courage to look back with a different set of eyes. When you finally realize that the little girl who was abandoned, who thought she had to be perfect to be loved, is still waiting, still hoping someone will come and say, "I see you. You are enough. You don't have to keep fighting." But no one can truly give her that. No one, except you. As long as you're searching outside for a healing that can only come from within, you'll keep falling into the same emotional trap. Because relationships don't heal wounds. They reveal them. They expose what you haven't yet integrated. And yes, that hurts. But it's also a gift. Because every time the same pain repeats, you're being offered a choice to sink deeper into the wound, or to walk through that pain toward real healing. Repetition isn't your punishment. It's your mirror. And when you finally learn to look at that reflection without judgment, without shame, with complete honesty, the cycle begins to break. Not suddenly, not overnight, but it does begin to break. It starts when you stop chasing what keeps hurting you, when you choose to stop defending the indefensible, when you set boundaries, not out of pride, but from deep self-love, when you decide to walk away, not because you've stopped feeling, but because you refuse to keep bleeding for someone who doesn't know how to hold your heart. That's the beginning of true awakening, because a woman who has faced her wounds with compassion no longer stays where love isn't mutual. She no longer accepts emotional crumbs. She no longer convinces herself that almost love is enough. A woman who has stood in the mirror of her relationships and made the decision to heal. She no longer repeats her trauma. She transforms it. She alchemizes it into wisdom. And from that place, she begins to love in a new way, not from scarcity, but from awareness, from wholeness, healing the wound, choosing differently. That is the awakening that changes everything. There comes a moment in every woman's life, a woman who's loved from her wounds, when something inside her shatters. But this time, it doesn't break the way it used to. This time, it's not a fall into darkness. It's a crack that lets in the light. It's a rupture that doesn't destroy her, but opens her eyes, opens her soul, opens her truth. And in that moment, even through the pain, even through the tears, even in fear, there is a part of her that can never fall back asleep. That moment arrives when you can no longer carry the emotional lie that kept you trapped. When you just can't keep making excuses for what is clearly not love. When you become profoundly tired of chasing what never truly chose you. And even if your heart still feels something, you choose to walk away. Even if it aches, you choose to let go. Even if your whole body trembles, you choose yourself. That is the real act of awakening. And no one can do it for you. Healing a wound is not some magical event. It's not a straight path. It's not waking up one day with everything perfectly fixed. Healing is deeper than that, messier than that. It's real. It's raw. It's sitting with yourself and saying, yes, I was that little girl who didn't feel good enough. Yes, I learned to love from sacrifice, from waiting, from fear. Yes, I betrayed myself again and again, just to avoid losing others. But it's also looking at yourself with deep compassion, and then adding the one thing that changes everything. No more. Because there comes a point where pain is no longer a valid excuse, and instead becomes the fuel. The fuel not to justify what you've allowed, but to start building the life and love you truly deserve. That is healing. It's no longer repeating from the wound. It's beginning to choose from consciousness. Carl Jung spoke of the process of individuation as the sacred journey through which the soul meets itself. It is a path of inner awakening where you begin to stop living for others, no longer shaped by expectations, masks, or roles you've learned to play. It's the moment you choose to no longer abandon yourself for the sake of fitting in or being accepted. Individuation is the courageous act of integrating your shadow, your wounds, your past, not to bury them or hide them away, but to understand them fully. And through understanding, you stop projecting them onto the world. You stop making choices from a place of emptiness, pain, or fear. Suddenly, you no longer seek validation from others. You no longer feel the urge to prove your worth through someone else's love. Because finally, something clicks deep inside. Something no one ever taught you when you needed it most. You are enough. And this isn't just a nice quote or a comforting phrase. It's a truth that becomes etched into your being when you finally decide to do the inner work. When you face the pain you spent a lifetime avoiding. When you stop running, stop begging, stop chasing, and instead start walking, step by step, back to yourself, back home. This journey isn't smooth or perfect. There will be setbacks, days of doubt, moments when you miss even the things that once hurt you. Because that's how the emotional system works. It circles back to what it knows, even if it's toxic, even if it's painful. But now, you're different. You see the pattern. You've reached the bottom, and while it felt like the end, it was really the beginning. The dark doorway that led you to your true worth. When a woman finally looks at herself with radical honesty, something shifts. She no longer bargains with her dignity. She no longer pours energy into places where there's no reciprocity. She stops begging for love from people who only know how to offer indifference. And that changes everything. You begin to feel peace in your own solitude, a peace more profound than the noise of being in bad company. You begin to enjoy your own silence, your own body, your own choices. You start to love not from a place of lack or desperation, but from wholeness. You choose from awareness, not from wounds. And when love arrives, it no longer makes you question yourself. It doesn't make you chase it. It doesn't confuse you or make you feel small. Real love does not drain you. It doesn't make you feel like you have to fight every day just to be seen. Real love sees you, even in your silence. It protects you, even without you asking. It chooses you, not through empty promises, but through meaningful actions. And most importantly, real love never tries to fill your inner void. Instead, it simply walks beside you while you fill it from within. That's what happens when you start choosing differently. Not because fear disappeared, not because you stopped loving, but because you finally chose yourself first. Because you realized, perhaps for the first time, that the most important love isn't the one you receive, but the one you stop denying yourself. And that truth changes everything. Healing your wound means you stop chasing love. You start becoming it. You made it this far in life because deep down, you already knew it. Some part of you didn't want to keep reliving the same pain with different faces. And now, it's clear. Your story doesn't end where you were broken. It truly begins the moment you choose to stop perpetuating the same pain with each decision you make. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means facing it with open eyes and an open heart, and choosing not to abandon yourself anymore just to keep someone else. A woman who chooses healing doesn't become cold or closed off or untrusting. She becomes aware, and that awareness makes her free. Free to stop begging for love. Free to stop carrying what was never hers to hold. Free to finally say, I did not come into this life to beg for what I deserve to receive in fullness. Carl Jung believed that the soul has an instinct toward wholeness, and that wholeness can never be reached by waiting for others to complete you. It comes when you choose to complete yourself from within. Today, you are ready to let go of the patterns, to release the trauma, to shed the version of you that believed she had to be chosen in order to matter. Today marks a new beginning, one that doesn't come from fear, but from truth. If you feel this in your heart, write it in the comments. I no longer chase love. I am love. And from that place, I choose differently. Because this is the woman I'm becoming. This is the woman I'm finally allowing myself to be. If you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to transform your life. But this is only the beginning. Watch the next video. It will leave you speechless and take you even deeper into this journey of transformation. Click now, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you never miss the content that could change the way you see everything. I'll see you in the next one.